Man, I've been trying to rent this, and the section they gonna pay $1,500 a month. I'll keep it vacant because I guarantee you're gonna have bed bugs and more garbage in that house. Now, when you can't afford, and I ain't talking down on anybody because I've been broke. Hell, I couldn't afford to pay my phone bill, so if I couldn't pay my phone bill, I surely couldn't afford to pay no broom.
Yeah, Mr. Four Flats.
So, but yeah, no, man. I mean, yeah, they'll tear up, but like, I don't think it's no more. But like, that's where it comes into screening your tenant.
Yep.
Really screening the tenant.
I'm gonna go through that.
Now, do you have a process for screening tenants?
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. So, when we come in, they come in, naturally we look at them, see how they communicate, how they dress, how they treating their kids, how the cars. Now I don't do this anymore, and nor really can you do this, but you have to understand, I don't base this after application, but if I see they come in and they look nasty and the kids look nasty and they get out of a car and garbage falls out of the car, which is true story, I will not accept them. I don't care how much. Man, I've been trying to rent this, and the section they gonna pay $1,500 a month. I'll keep it vacant because I guarantee you're gonna have bed bugs and more garbage in that house than you did when you first bought it. But seriously, I look at the kids, how they treat them. Now, if the kids are clean, mama clean, daddy clean, whatever, I'm starting to like them. And I get into the application. Now, but then it's those criteria, like I said, if they had a felony in the last 5 years, eviction in the last 2 years, and sometimes they meet all of that stuff and something just ain't right. Like, and I won't take a tenant that's like, hey man, I need a place. I said, okay, cool. When you trying to move? Tomorrow. Like, yeah, no.
That's a good topic.
Yeah, let me mess with you. I need to understand rent reasonableness. Rent reasonable is in layman's term, even though they have marginal rent, market rate rents, they still, I guess this is a way of saying I ain't paying you all that in layman's term. Because for example, you got a 3-unit, right? In Section 8 will pay, I think, about $1,350 or $1,395, but then they deduct your utility allowance and some other fees, right? The utility allowance is inclusive of water, trash, gas, and let you know who pays for it versus if the tenant pays for it or the owner pays for it. And so what happens, they'll come to determine, say, all right, you requested $1,350, but we only gonna pay $1,100 or $1,250.
And is that because the tenant, let's say in that situation, the tenant only pays for the water, or they don't pay for any utilities, and the landlord, so the Section 8 is deducting?
Well, that's more utility allowance. So for the utility allowance, yeah. So let's say it's $1,350. That it's kind of plus. So let's say it's $1,350, and so let's say there's the water that gets deducted, and they say, all right, does the tenant or the owner pay it? So if the owner pays it, and let's say they would normally deduct $80 for that, well, now that won't be a deduction.
Got it.
Because the owner pays. If the tenant paid for it, they would deduct $80 from that $1,350. Then who pays the gas for the kitchen, the stove? Does the tenant or the owner? If the tenant pay for it, they're gonna deduct it from the top request of the rent. But what happens, what I'm getting into, not only that's standard, but what I'm getting into, so that, understand, if the max Section 8 pays $1,350 and you do your utility allowance, and utility allowance, if you're not paying anything, it'll end up being like $150 deduction, maybe a little more. All right. But in this rent reasonableness, man, this is where it gets tricky. For example, I have a 3-bedroom that Section 8 was paying $972 for. Then all of a sudden, they're like, we ain't paying it. We only paying $875. That's what we went through our rent reasonable, and we couldn't find anybody else in the market paying that. I was like, but Leo, you just paid me over here $975. Why now you trying to pay me $875? So then you got to kind of dispute it, fight over it. or not accept. So sometimes we don't accept, because what happens when you do accept, if you accept that 975 that 875, when you got another Section 8 tenant, because you're like, oh, forget it, we'll get on the next one. They just, for whatever reason, they couldn't pay that. No, they're gonna hold you to the fire and say, oh man, we ain't paying 974. You already accepted 875. I'm not going past the market.
Gotcha.
So that's where they get you. So, me and Nate, we kind of stubborn on this. Nate more than me. He's like, man, I don't want to do that. I'm not renting to them. Pros and cons of Section 8. The pros, you get your rent, baby. Where the money reside, where the money reside, where the money reside, where the money. It reside with CMHA.
Where the money reside, where the money reside, where the money reside, where the money reside.
Hey man, you can get your money through Section 8 every month. And that's what we love it. And your cash flow could come out better, because like in some markets, if you would rent to a market rate tenant, the most you can get is probably $600, $650. Whereas here with Section 8, they may pay you $750, $800. Well, I'm going with Section 8, unless, but I mean, you could keep pushing, or maybe you're like, man, I don't want to deal with that. I want my one tenant that pays me $600 a month. Yeah, that's cool. I was kind of one of those guys, because I didn't want to do no work.
Is it once you're Section 8, you Section 8, or you can?
No, I mean, you can still do market rate. You don't necessarily have to, just because there's Section 8, take somebody, not be able to take Section 8. Excuse me again. The cons: must submit yearly to inspection. You got to do inspections yearly, and it's basic stuff, but make sure they got good house cleaning, even though that's on the tenant. But you got to make sure the windows open, the electric works, you can plug in and out, nothing's cracked. Everything just has to work.
Yeah, safe.
Yeah, safe. Tend to work better in lower middle income areas. Non-Section 8 tenants may not want to rent. Okay, yeah. So like, I'm not, when I lived in Westwood, I had a 2-family, and I rented Section 8 to the top floor. But it all comes in the screening. Like, matter of fact, two of my tenants were all Section 8 the whole time I lived here. So that didn't bother me. In fact, I had 3 Section 8 tenants. So that don't bother me. But some people like, man, like I remember in College Hill when they started letting Section 8 come in, but they ain't really screened the tenants. So it was a little rough. And so, they was like, man, I don't want to be here no more. And so Section 8 gets the bad rap for that. How to succeed with Section 8? You got to understand the Section 8 housing process, the rules and the requirements. The property in line with Section 8 requirements, basic safety, does things work, stuff like that. You want to pre-screen your students, because you want to turn down tenants. Pre-screen your tenants, because you don't want to accept everybody. Just because you get a Section 8 voucher don't mean it's going to be gravy. You still have to screen the tenant. Screen, and let me tell you one more time, screen.
Yep.
Because if you don't screen, you're going to be screaming.
That's a good one. If you don't scream, you will be screaming, pulling your hair until you're bald.
Yeah, you're going to be looking like me, man.
Go!
Yeah. And follow eviction procedure of tenants who violate the lease. Like, look, man, even if they got a Section 8, you still can, if they tearing up, and even if they're paying, you just give them a 30-day notice.
Yep.
All right.
Which is this one.
Yeah, here we go. Know the rules and rights. You can evict a Section 8 tenant even if she is late on the tenant portion of the rent. You can evict a Section 8 tenant for disturbing the neighbors, for criminal activities, or drugs. So now, when they're late, you can give them that 3, 5, 7 day notice. When they disturbing the neighbors and for criminal activities, and that's for anybody, you gotta give them. You gotta have history, right? So let's say they're disturbing the tenants. Well, and you write a letter to them saying, "Hey, you're breaking your lease. You're disturbing tenants. You're violating your lease. If you don't do something about it, we'll eventually have grounds to evict you." Then if they do it again, hey, you're disturbing the tenants, blah, blah, blah. The reason why you do it, because you want to have a track record. If you don't have no track record, so when you go to evict them, they go like, man, he told me that I was loud. Well, have you ever got a notice? Nope. Well, how do we know he was loud? Right? But see, if you got a track record, a note, and it's in their folders, you show that, and they'll be like, man, 30, get out. Peace. Get to stepping.
Time for you to leave.
Renovate the property in line with Section 8 requirements. You know, I mean, look, when we talk about renovating, now I got some nice stuff that I rent to Section 8. I remember when we first started, I had tons of Section 8. And people was like, I want to live with them, because we started off in Lincoln Heights. And we would get deals on paint buckets. So, but I never forget, I walked in this one house, man. They painted every room a different color.
Oh,
I was like, whoa, man. Like, man, it's accenting the wall. Like, no, man, this is a coloring crayon box. That's what you did. You know, I mean, we got all this discount. We all got like 5-gallon buckets of paint for $5, and it was the oddest colors. And we were using tile. You know, nobody was using tile. They was using that like tile sub around the fake stuff, and man, we would lay them out. Nice carpet. But I mean, the bottom line with Section 8, man, it needs to be clean. And if you're doing with lower end, you need to address your building. But now, man, with those laminate floors, you can still use that for a Section 8 tenant, and they can mop it and clean it.
That's
and,
what,
you know,
that's
to work.
most.
Make it tenant proof.
Yeah, it's tenant proof.
Yeah, tenant proof.
I mean, but even you see it in nice houses now, man. Like I'm seeing it in $150,000, $200,000 houses, man. They putting this vinyl wood flooring. I ain't gonna call it cheap, but it's cheap. Instead of carpet. You get longer wear, you know, it ain't staining your carpet. They can mop it, they can clean it.
Yeah.
So, you know,